Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I think we are right at 12, which is great. Um, all right. Well, I think we have all of our panelists here, so we can go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us for the Justice Education Series hosted by the PD Green program. I am so incredibly excited for our panel this afternoon. But before we get started, I'm just going to do some introductions, starting with myself and a little bit about the PD Green program and the Puttkammer Center. So just getting started, I am Jade Williams. I am the Strategic Programs Manager with the Puttkammer Center for Educational Justice here at the PD Green program. And as a lot of you know, the PGP is the largest multi-state provider of tutoring and educational services in carceral and reentry spaces. And so the PGP has been around for almost 20 years. And in those 20 years, we've gained a lot of experience in individualized educational services for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated students. And the Puttkammer Center kind of builds on that expertise to identify best practices that can be replicated at scale, shared with the broader field, as well as shape education in carceral and reentry spaces. So through this kind of combination of research and practice, we evaluate PGP's programs to identify what works and why, and we design, test, and evaluate and pilot new evidence-based programs. So in addition to that work of providing educational support and evaluation, we are also committed to providing our volunteers and the wider community with the tools needed to understand the broader impacts of the carceral system. And through that, we hope to play a role in connecting our volunteers with the broader movement for change. And one of the ways that we do that is through programming like today's Justice Education series entitled Gendered Injustice, Women and the Criminal Legal System. So just some quick Zoom notes. In this webinar, we cannot see or hear any of our attendees, but you will be able to use the chat throughout, as well as the Q&A. And we're going to spend about 50 minutes or so hearing from our panelists, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. So throughout the whole program, feel free to put those questions, comments, thoughts in the Q&A or chat, and we will make sure to kind of leave time for that. Another quick unofficial Zoom note, I do have a cat that really loves to mess with my laptop. So at any point, if you see me disappearing, if you see whiskers, that's what's happening. So just ignore that. We will work through that. Right now she's napping, so let's hope we can get through this whole webinar with her sleeping. So in regards to our topic today, here at the PGP, we kind of recognize the intersectional layers of oppression that occur within the carceral system and beyond, and kind of the different ways and impacts of those layers on marginalized communities along varying lines of identity, and whether that's race, class, sexuality, or gender. So today's panel, we're going to focus on the impacts of gender on system-impacted women as they navigate the criminal legal system, both inside and outside. And we will hear from women doing incredible, incredible work to highlight the experiences of incarcerated women and the sort of various networks of advocacy, support, and community that work to combat gendered injustice. So very excited, as I said. So I'm just going to do kind of very brief bare bones introductions of our panelists, and then I'm going to turn it over to them to give you a bit more of an intro to themselves and the work that they are doing. So, firstly, we have Sarah Bennett. Sarah is a 2024 Guggenheim Fellow and a former public defender. And Sarah uses photography to draw attention to the problems of mass incarceration. Her work has been widely exhibited in museums and galleries, including MoMA PS1, and it is in the collection of several museums. Next, we have Alethea Taylor, who is a seasoned educator and nonprofit leader with more than 27 years of experience advancing justice for women, youth, and families. She currently serves as the executive director of Our Children, where she leads programs that support women affected by incarceration, substance use, and mental health challenges, while strengthening pathways to stability, education, and family reunification. Next, we have Rossella Scalacci, who is an award-winning filmmaker and visual anthropologist. Her works are based on her in-depth anthropological research using cutting-edge audio and visual methodologies. She is also the co-founder of the independent production company Azul, where she works as a researcher, author, and filmmaker. And last but certainly not least, we have our very own Lynn Sullivan, who is a regional manager for the PD Green program in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. She has been involved with the criminal justice system and prison education for over 25 years. She earned her BA and was valedictorian in 2009 from the Boston University Prison Education Program. She went on to complete several licenses and a master's degree in criminal justice from Boston University, first generation. And Lynn continues to be an advocate for educational justice, substance disorders, and trauma support. So, as you can hear from those very brief introductions, we have an incredible group of panelists with us today. So, I'm just going to dive right in and turn it over to them to give them a few minutes to kind of describe the work that they do and how they kind of came to this work. So, Sarah, would you like to get us started?
Okay, but then I'm going to share my screen and show photos while I talk, and I'll try to be really fast, okay?
Absolutely.
Um, so you're seeing my whole screen now, right? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, you can hear me,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. So I was a criminal appeals attorney for 20 years, and then I left the practice of law to do something completely different. And I thought I was actually done with the whole criminal system. But I always kind of kept a client or two, like a pro bono client. And in 2009, I picked up a case of this woman named Judith Clark, who was serving a 75-year, this is not her, who was serving a 75-year to life sentence in New York State. And many of the formerly incarcerated women I knew asked me would I try to help her. And after I thought about it for a while, I said, okay, I guess I will. And I tried to get clemency for her from the governor of the state of New York. And I started this in 2009. And at that time, we had a governor who was blind, and I was building a campaign for her. I mean, it's hard to know because this is almost 20 years ago, and people weren't talking about clemency. They weren't thinking about it. They weren't thinking about incarceration. People didn't know the words mass incarceration. We've come a long way, actually, in the last probably 10 years, 8 to 10 years. So anyway, I was building a campaign for Judy, and I got all these letters of support, and I got some famous actors to read from the letters of support, and I put together an audio which I sent to the governor at the time, and that was Governor Patterson. And he listened to it, and it was just like a weird way of doing advocacy. And he said he would give her clemency, but he did not. And then the next governor came in, and I was giving talks about Judy. And one day I gave a talk, and Alethea, you'll like this, but I was giving a talk, and somebody ran up from the audience and said, if it weren't for Judy, I wouldn't have a relationship with my children. And then somebody else ran up and said, if it weren't for Judy, I wouldn't have gone to college or something like that. And I was like, who are these women? It looked like I had staged it, but I had not. And actually, some of them came from Our Children, and which is where Alethea is, who I've never met, but I actually spent a lot of time photographing at Our Children. And so I walked around with this idea in my head, like, how could I channel that? Because it was so powerful. And I don't know honestly how I came up with it, but one day I was just like, I'm going to photograph some of these women, and these are the women you're seeing right now. And I'm going to have them write something about Judy's influence on them. And I put together a little advocacy booklet, and I sent it to the governor, state legislators, at that time, a brand new commission on reentry. And there was a very positive reaction to it. It was also like email was kind of getting bigger back then. And so I heard back from people, and they were more interested in the women in my photos than they were in Judy. And just to say, I was not a photographer then. I was using my husband's camera. He's a photographer. And he was like helping me a little bit, not really with the photos, but just like with the setup. So when I got that response, I was like, oh, like I've worked with women who've been incarcerated for decades, but people have a stereotype, and I'm going to challenge that stereotype. And so I actually asked Judy, who was still in prison at that time, did she know anybody coming home from prison? And she introduced me to a woman named Kayla, who is actually not, I'm not showing her photos today. And I just started following the women around in their reentry as they went about work and reestablishing relationships with their families, going to church. And now I've been doing this, it's like 13 years long project, but I didn't know where it was going to go or what I was going to do with it. And after I'd been photographing for about a year and a half, I got my first exhibition at SUNY Purchase. And the press was kind of interested in what I was doing too. So I started getting a lot of attention to the work. And then I started photographing a lot of women in their bedrooms. And I have like 50 women. Oh, by the way, every single woman I've ever photographed was convicted of homicide and sentenced to, had a life sentence, meaning they didn't know if they were going to get out of prison. This is Carol, who Alethea, I don't know if you ever met Carol. She lived and died at Our Children, and she she was somebody, I mean, because I through photography, I got to talk so much about all the issues around incarceration. So somebody like Carol had a 25-year to life sentence. She was at a time when the parole board was never letting people out. She ended up serving 35 years in prison, even though she had a completely stellar record. And by the time she came home, she was pretty sick. And so she never, I mean, she had a totally fine time at Our Children. She loved it there, and she established relationships, and she volunteered there and lived there. But if she had come home when she should have, she wouldn't have had so many, she would have had some years on the outside when she was healthier. So these are just kind of, oh, this is Kayla, by the way. She was my very first person I photographed. Um, so the more attention I got to the work and the more established I became as a photographer, I wanted to go back inside prison. That's really where what I always wanted to do was photograph inside prison. I just didn't have the skills. And so then I learned the skills and I started photographing women inside prison. And so this is all part of one, at this point, huge project that I call Looking Inside Women with Life Sentences. I love this because this is Monica, who was granted clemency. I was one of her pro bono attorneys. And then I photographed her getting married 2 years later. And it's just kind of a phenomenal thing to be part of these women's lives in such a huge way. This is Judy. She did ultimately get clemency. It took like 9 years, but it was really great. And I got to meet with the governor's office many times and show photos and advocate for her. And then this is her now. She worked at Our Children with you, Alethea, for quite some time. And so now I have a book that's coming out. So this is all gathered together. And now I have a book. It's coming out in Europe in like 3 weeks, and it's coming out in the US in September. And I'm hoping that it's going to make a big impact also because it has, I think, a pretty rich view of the women. And some of them are, it has the things which we call ephemera that they send to me. So this is a woman, and when her kids came to visit her in prison, and she drew like a little book for her kids about their visit. And so my book has pages from her book. It's got letters that people have sent me, their reentry, Polaroids of them growing up in prison. So there's all kinds of things that I hope ultimately give people a real sense of the richness of people who are caught up in the system, and to make people really wonder, why do we incarcerate? Why do we incarcerate for so long? please don't forget about women and please don't forget about the long-termers either. And then the back of the book has an essay by myself and also by my client, Judith Clark. And then it also has sort of pictorial, this is my handwriting where I talk about the things that people always asked me, like what happens if somebody dies, or why do you get deported, or why don't you get parole, or how do you get on parole, or how come somebody has life without parole and somebody else doesn't. So that's that's my work, and I'm happy that you gave me a chance to share a little bit of it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. Whoever wants to go next.
Well, I can go. Wow, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for starting with that. I think, it's so impactful, and shows the humanity of the people that are inside, men and women, and that sometimes we forget. Also that we are not the most egregious mistake. Some happened and some didn't, but we are not the most egregious mistake that we've made in our lives, and that we come through it. So thank you so much, Sarah, and I look forward to meeting you soon.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting you too. Can you hear us or both of us? Yeah.
So Judy, just to say, Judy and the other women that we serve, some of them I've seen in the picture. I started at this organization 4 years ago, and I started, you never know why you do things. And I remember being asked to take on this position. I was like, I'm a professor at Hunter. The stress of everyday work as a CEO, which I had done before, is so much. And then after really seeing the mission and deciding to go on the interview to say, all right, let me just see, since I'm being asked, and to hear about the visits and how we connect children to their mothers, because I've always known about our children, but I did not know the extent of the work around how we connect mothers to their children who are incarcerated. And I don't think that the public or even volunteers really understand how immeasurable it is to be able to connect with your child while you're incarcerated, and what that does for you as a human being. I wasn't incarcerated, but I had a brother that was. And I spent 17 years going back and forth. I didn't realize that I was doing the work of our children. Anyone that came from I'm West Indian, so people came from Jamaica, so I had to take them to see him. If they came from England or Canada, I was the designated person, plus I was the only one that had a car. And so I just automatically was the person, but I did it, and I did it every month, maybe 2 months out of the year when I was in college or something was going on, but consistently 10 months every year. And that was extremely meaningful. When my brother came out, and we gave him a year, because we set him up for reentry for a year so that we could support him. And he said to us, Alethea, if it wasn't for the visits, I think that I would have done something to myself, because it was so hard. And then we had to always move with them wherever, Shawanga, Wallkill, and so forth. And so the reason why I came to this work, I don't think I realized when I came to this work in 94 how meaningful and purposeful it would be all these years later. And my purpose now is to serve women who are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, and to make sure that they stay in relationship with their kids. And so what the hour, HOUR, children, what the hour means is that every hour a child is away from their parents is critical. And so we are there to arrest those hours. So at the time of the arrest, at the time of the visit, and at the time of the reunification, those hours are paramount. And so that's why we exist. And I'll talk a little bit more later on about who we are and the type of work we do. But I am always blessed when I see women who have been inside and they're now taking over the world, like Judy is. who is now a director of an organization called Survivors Justice Project, which I'm so proud to be her colleague in this work where we're trying to close Rosie's, which is a jail on Rikers Island in New York City. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much.
Well, maybe since we are speaking about children with incarcerated mother, I really thank you, Sarah and Alita, for what you said. It's and the picture you show, it's very touching. And maybe I can speak about my experience because I got to know that there were children with mother in Italian prison when I was I had a small son, a small baby by myself, and I get to know that in my city, in Torino, in Italy, and there were a section called the nursery section that allow mother to keep their incarcerated mother to keep their children until 3 years old of age, 3 years of age. And for me, it was a shock because I didn't know. I didn't know that the state could give these possibilities. The mother can choose if take the children with them or live with family members. So the problem is that several mothers are alone. Maybe are not Italian, are from abroad, so they don't know where to leave the child. And if they cannot take care of them or the child go in foster custody. And sometimes, especially for Roman people or from women with not with poor, let's say, social system and network, they lose their children. So women are scared to lose their children when so they have very few years maybe of to pay to serve to the state, and they don't want to lose their children, so they keep the children with them in the prison because they for this reason. So I decided to start a research as a visual anthropologist and then as a documentarist filmmaker, and I managed after years of asking authorization to film inside the nursery section of my city. And maybe I can show 1 minute of the document. I realized a feature-length documentary called, in English, Imprisoned Lullaby. And I want just to show a minute just to see the environment. I do share the screening or, yeah, I'll try. Or if for you is a better, Jade, do you want to do it? Or...
Anyway, do
okay,
you want
I'll
me to
try.
do it or?
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Can you hear the
Yes.
Dimmi, cos'hai il gioco? Vieni qua. Sei svegliata? Saluti? Buongiorno.
Okay, this is just wait, stop. Okay. Just 1 minute to show the spaces, because at that time, and I speaking, this is almost 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. At that time, there were only this nursery section inside an adult prison. So children were really living in a prison for adults in this section. And they followed them to see the everyday life that, can you imagine, is terrible, because they absorb all the sufferance and the sound, like they see, but they also listen to all the sound of the jail, like the screaming, the crying, the guards, and they see how, and we speak about that maybe, how the guards treat the mother in jail. But then, fortunately, there a new law in the Italian system open some kind of special institution, special in prison, let's say, children friendly. And so I asked myself, okay, how can a prison be children friendly? It's real or not? So I started a different project. This time really in collaboration with mother and children. So it's a more collaborative project using virtual reality and animation. And I did a PhD also. So now I'm right now writing a book about the experience, but the short documentary is out now. And I want again to show you 1 minute so you understand more or less how is it. I try now.
La mamma sarà la principessa. Io sarò il lupo.
Prima di tutto avevo le allucinazioni veramente. Mi sentivo fuori dal mondo, non lo so.
Io vorrei tanto una casa vicino al mare. E poi devi buttarmi sopra a vedere un po' di cielo.
Okay. Did you manage to read the subtitles or were too small? Okay. So just to tell that this is a more complex project, we use animation and illustration workshop to allow children and mothers that are not so good also to use the language, especially Italian language, to express through illustration their fears and their dreams. And through the short film, we show all the different kind of prison for mothers, like the old panopticon system, the old nursery section that now, for example, in Italy, it's again in function because we have a right-wing government, and this new children-friendly prison. So that's it. I think I can stop now and be open for a question later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lynn, would you like to just tell us a bit?
That would be me. Yes. Thank you, ladies. You are all amazing. What you're doing is highlighting the humanity inside a system that is so inhumane and harmful to women. I come to this panel with lived experience. I am not just a mom, but I was also formerly incarcerated for over 16 years. I am one of those lifers that didn't know if they were ever coming home or not. But yet here I am. I never thought I was going to be into educational field, to be honest with you. Probably never thought about that one. But when I was incarcerated, it was the education that opened up all the opportunities in my life, made me start to heal from all that trauma that I was being relived every day while I was incarcerated. So being able to sort of learn and continue to learn at the same time, I wound up where I was actually being able to sign folks up so they could go to school. And so they could have that same opportunity to learn. And I have the privilege of watching women from like 19 years old coming in with sentences that they should have never had, not even having their children with them in any way, but they went to school. Like I would always dope smack them on the sides, get your butt in school. And when they did, they stopped going to solitary confinement, sort of like myself. I spent time in the hole. I went to school. I didn't want to lose school, and the people that I signed up for, they stopped going to the hole. And I got to see the differences in the growth. But the best thing in the world is when you're home and I get to see them come home And then they send me a picture of a cap and gown because they've finished their BA, or with their children because now they have that relationship back together again. Our systems are so flawed, so I really love the fact that you're all bringing up some of the situations that go on the inside, especially when it comes to children and women losing their children. It is the most hardest thing in the world for a mother to be in a prison system and not know where their kid is. That is the more trauma that you could give anyone, but you're also, I like to highlight a lot of the facts that a lot of the women have been beaten, battered, and bruised in one form or another in those systems. They're re-traumatized every day by the lifestyle in that prison system and the way that they're treated. But also, when you can, we're a different beast. We could say women are different. We require different things. We're just special like that. And I look forward to all these questions and hearing your voices and how you're raising it. So thank you, Judy, for putting this together.
Thank you all so much. Those were incredible introductions, and I'm really happy we got to hear about everybody's work and experiences and actually see it as well. I think that's such a powerful way for us to get started. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, so I kind of just want to get us started more broadly. I think everybody brought up so many really interesting facets of this topic when it comes to gender and incarceration. But I think just kind of thinking broadly, and even why we would have a webinar focused on this topic. So I kind of want to talk about what is the importance of thinking about gender distinctly, kind of as Lynn was getting us started with, and women specifically when it comes to incarceration. What kind of gaps does it help us address? And if anyone wants to speak to also kind of the benefits of focusing on these gendered impacts of incarceration. So yeah, just kind of broad, if anybody wants to jump in, everybody wants to jump in.
I mean, kind of everything, right? Like every single aspect from what, the kind of crimes that women commit, who they commit them with, how their partner, who more than likely, because almost, I mean, I don't know, in all the years that I was representing people, I represented men and women, but the women's issues were always different. There was a lot of abuse in women's backgrounds, just a lot. And most of it was never addressed ever anywhere along the system, I mean, I kind of came up as a lawyer at the time when women were going to prison for killing their abusers without having any kind of self-defense claim. So like that's a whole topic. But then the way women are treated in prison, like the way women build community in prison, or the fact that like if you go to any men's prison in New York State on a Saturday or Sunday, it is going to be packed with visitors. And women's prisons in general are not like that because it's the women who are going to visit the guys. But unless like a woman maybe has like a mom or somebody who might come to see her on occasion, like it's just, I mean, all you have to do is go once, go to a men's prison, go to a women's, and you'll just see it. And then the women are guarded by like male guards who are traumatizing them. I mean, I could just go on and on. I mean, it's just like every single part of it. And then also like when they come home, there's very few services for them. Almost all of the money is dedicated to men. And I mean, women are a very small percentage of the system. That's true. They are a very small percentage of the system, but that doesn't mean that we should just forget about them.
I think one of the first things that we think about is that incarceration is often designed around a gender neutral idea of a person in custody. So, but on I guess fortunately, it is deeply gendered in the causes and experiences and even the consequences. When we ignore gender, we miss how systems interact differently with the pathways that women that Sarah just talked to about how they get into prison, whether it's partner violence, substance use, trauma, untreated trauma. And so I think it's also very important thank you for bringing that and surfacing that, Sarah, as to why people actually, women and transgender individuals also come into these systems. I think one of the the problems is systems are not designed for their needs. So the trauma, the caregiving, they're not providing appropriate health care. This is men and women, obviously, but I think the cycles of separation from the children for mothers are much more paramount because they're usually the caregivers. You know, just simple things that others may not think about, even just having your menstrual cycle and how that is impacted, and the fact that you can't get a pad and that you have to wait, and that you have to ask some man to get that when you've never done that before, and you go in and it's this thing and you're bartering for menstrual pads. And I'm being graphic because this is the reality that many women are facing, and they may not have people to come and send them stuff. So for example, one of the biggest issues that some of our women talk about is the stigma. You shouldn't have went to prison in the first place. How you in prison without your kids? You know you have kids. Why you did what you did? Why did you mess with him? You knew he was a drug dealer. All these things that are not being said to one population, but they're being said to this population. So that has created its own issues. Also, Sarah, you're so right. Mother's Day this year is going to be like every year packed in the men's prisons. When I used to go to the men's prisons Mother's Day, I used to hate going. The only reason I went was because of my mama, and my brother wanted to see it, but the lines were long. You know, it was just overwhelming. But I have seen what happens at Bedford Hills. This is where we primarily have our services, that in Taconic Correctional Facilities. And it's not the same. When you go into the visiting rooms also on a regular day, you know what you see a lot of? You see a lot of people that are praying for the women. So they're the pastors, Jehovah's Witnesses, and so on. So that's what you see. And then the other thing is that there's such isolation, not being able to see your kids, not being for caregivers who are often women who are grandparents, that they can't travel to the prisons to see the mothers. And so that also creates a problem. And just returning home, making sure you get back your kids. So, you know, I think thinking about incarceration through a gender lens doesn't mean separating women out as an exception. It means really recognizing that the system impacts people differently, and how design responses need to acknowledge those differences. That's one of the things that we're doing in New York City. Whether we want to get to the place where we have some abolition or not, we're in a place in the United States that prisons are not going to stop for the future moment, right? And so if we're going to do things differently, then we have to look at the design, and we have to be intentional, and we have to make sure we don't do any more harm.
I love what both of you brought to the plate. Like, you took words right out of my mouth, especially when you mentioned the biological realities of things when it comes to those pads. You hit the money on the market, where it's just like, it is the most embarrassing time of your life when you have to walk into an office, ask a 19-year-old kid, you know, boy, can I have a couple of pads, please? Can I have some pads? And they hand you 2. And they say, yeah, that should be good for the day. It's like, excuse me? Can we talk here? You know, and then if you start compiling them up for that time, because that's what you have to do. You have to stop piling them up and then hiding them, because if a room search happens, then they're just going to take them all from you when you're starting all over again with nothing. But the other topic is that trauma that's happening on a daily basis is not just the products, but when you have women that have been harmed, and you have a male officer who's walking down those steps or walking through the galleyways, and they have the windows. They look right into your cell. They can see you sitting on that toilet. They can see you getting changed. And the most hardest part is when you're taking a shower and your curtain might not cover anything much. They still bang on that door and say, man coming through. They could care less if you've been harmed or the trauma that you faced. When I first went into the prison system, I heard staff calling people crackhead and whores and this and that. And I was just like, go ahead and call me that and see what happens. I'm like, how can this even be happening? I was devastated to see that they were okay with that, some of the women, because they didn't even know how to respond. And they were young kids. But we don't really think about some of those factors because, you know, when we do have those abusers or issues that went throughout our lives that sort of stayed in there and didn't get healed or didn't even get recognized, we just survived. We weren't like living, we survived. And you're putting in a system that really just rekindles it over and over again instead of building that strength that we need. There's so many changes that need to happen within our systems to really highlight the women, because the women really are the powerhouses in this world, whether people want to, you know, say it out loud or not, but I will. We run it all. You know, there isn't a man that's not high up that doesn't have a female somewhere or a wife or partner that's literally backing them up to help them get there. But women, we have a connection, you know, and that connection really makes people see the humanity of things. And when I came home, I went to classrooms, I went to criminal justice classes, and I spoke about the humanity of it. So when I could leave that room, people would be like, oh shit, they're not just that stigma, they're not just that crime, but oh wow, those are people. And I get to do that for a job now, where I have students going in there and they're coming back on a debrief saying, wow, I never thought of it that way. But they're people just like me. So I really appreciate you women here today.
I mean, everything about the system is set up so that we forget that people are people. Like when I started out, I was an appellate lawyer, and most of my colleagues, when they would argue, they would say appellant, but they wouldn't say Mr. or Miss so-and-so. Like I always used their names. And just that little thing was enough to, I thought, to make them feel like they were a real person. If you call them, you know, if they're always known by their number or something like that, it's like, you know, call this some person by their name. And
Well,
I mean, that's so basic, right?
yeah.
But
The system's designed, the moment you
yeah,
walk through those doors, they're stripping you from every humanity
right.
you have,
Yeah.
every dignity that you have, and reminding me, you know, that you are completely powerless in the system and that you do not matter. They do that with that strip search and how graphic it gets to
Mhm.
remind you that you are no
Right.
longer a human being and anything you think or have doesn't matter because they're in power.
Thank you so much. I just want to add that the Italian system is different because the guards have to be female in the prison if there are women, and especially women with children. So, fortunately, I think women incarcerated don't experience the trauma Lynn was speaking about. But there is another problem because some, not all, but some female guards have a big stigma and stereotype towards them, especially the mothers, because for them are bad mothers. So these female guards, in a way, really treat badly the mothers because they say we are from the side of the children shouldn't be here in prison. That's true, it's true, but still you cannot treat, you have to respect the mother as a mother, but there is no respect from the guards, and this can be another problem. And I assist several times where the mothers in front of their children are scolded, are bad treated, are insulted, and they can't really answer. Otherwise, they will get a report and they will get problems with the children. So there are pro and different advantages and disadvantages, I think.
So, you know, in Bedford Hills where we have the nursery, the mothers only stay a year and then they can extend 6 months. And I have friends who don't necessarily get what I do. And so some of you probably have that situation. And especially when you're inside. And one of the things that they'll say to me is, well, what does it do to the children? And I said, a mother that's the baby is just born don't know where they are. All they know is that they're with their mother. And the environment that they're in does not feel like a prison. And by the time, for Bedford Hills anyway, by the time the child starts recognizing something, they're actually out of the system, right? And that makes a huge difference. And I think that's also what I'm hopeful for too, is to really create an opportunity for conversation that people, because there's a stereotype as well about having the woman inside with prison and how bad it is, and that even in progressive New York City and New York State, I should say, that we still have that issue where I have people who are working in this field, and they'll say things like that about the familial relationship and not really thinking about how much it is so important that that mom bonds with that child right in the beginning, because that's the whole purpose, that the mom bonds with the child. And if you're only doing a year, why should you be separated from your child? So thank you for raising that. That really is an important aspect to this whole piece around incarceration and the bonding and the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you all so much for that. I feel like so much of what you're touching upon actually kind of leads into this piece. I feel like a lot of what's coming up in terms of like the stigma that happens and the communities in which those like stigmas are like perpetuated, and the gendered harms don't necessarily have to come from people that are of the opposite gender and those sort of things. So I think just kind of thinking through the ways that community kind of manifests and some of the ways we've been talking about a bit more negatively and sort of contributing to those stigmas. But I also see a lot in the work that you were all talking about and the spaces, the importance of community among women, whether it's kind of through the incarcerated mothers participating in communal childcare together, as we see in like Our Children and like Rosella's films, or even as Lynn was saying, kind of getting each other to go to class and like being that sort of educational support buddy that it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to class. And the testimonies from Women for Judy in your work, Sarah. So just kind of thinking about the way that there's this real gendered sense of like community building that happens. And I was wondering if you could all kind of speak to the importance and impact of those sort of networks of care and community that incarcerated women are creating together, and kind of what that looks like in the different spaces you've been in and like your experiences with that.
Can I give a quick story? It's funny, this morning, one of my staff member who's formerly incarcerated was actually Sarah talking about Judy. And I can't remember what we were talking about, specifically why we got here. But she said, she had another friend and the friend did not want to engage. Well, first, the friend didn't want to be her friend at all, because I'm going to be in here for 50 years and I'm never getting out. So I don't want to talk to anyone who want to engage. So Judy went up to her and said, we have a lot of women here, people who are doing good work. Try to get your education. You never know what's going to happen in the future. Get involved in something. There's a lot of these people come here, the civilians, and they do a lot of good things for us. And I think it would be important for you to come and to see what's going on. And they continued in that conversation with her. And the woman finally decided to engage. And she's out now. And she didn't do her 50 years. She was able to come out, I think, within 20. And I think that's the kind of network community that women and people inside in general too, but that network of caring. And she said they hounded her, her words, for quite some time in order to get her to be a part of community.
I mean, I think one of the things about the women's prisons is that they're small. I mean, I don't know how many Bedford has now. What it used to have like 850. I think it's down to like 500 or something like that.
Yeah, it's 600 and change.
Oh, six. Okay. And so when you think about it, and some of the people are there for decades, I mean, it also becomes like it's like a cloistered community is basically what it is. And everybody who's there, and because it's a max, people are there for a long time. They go through like a variety of phases, but they definitely have that idea of like each one teach one, and basically they run the prison. I mean, that's what people don't also realize is
That
there's
is
always a
true.
civilian in charge, but really it's the people who live in prison who do all the work, whether it's the maintenance or it's the any kind of maintenance, or whether it's feeding people, or whether it's running the programs in the education setting, or whether it's the gym. I mean, it is a community. And so when people come out, like a lot of the women I photographed in the beginning all came through our children. I was like, wasn't there anybody anywhere else? But they were all coming home to housing that was provided by our children.
That's Sister
And
Tisa.
for me, Sister
I
Tisa,
said,
yeah, I know her very well. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so, I mean, in some ways, that's like the plus side is that these bonds are built, whether you want them to be or not, and
I love the fact that you just mentioned that bond, because on the inside, you do create that bond. I know we only have one state women's prison in Massachusetts. When I was there, the population could go as high as 750 and overcrowded as can be. Now it's down to less than 200 at this point. But basically it's long-termers that are still there instead of short-termers. But you had a family there if you were a lifer. So like there was distinctions.
Mhm.
You had a different level of respect. You had officers treating you differently. But you also had a Thanksgiving meal that you knew you were never going to have to be alone at.
Mhm.
Because regardless of what unit you were in, you're all going to meet somehow, and one of you is all going to be together. And you didn't have to go through holidays alone when you're wishing you were with your children, and you can't be, and the hard times that is. And even Mother's Day, you had that connection, that bond with each other. And people will be like, so y'all love each other and like each other. Well, you know what? We all have different colors going inside of us. We have different things that have happened, and we have good sides and bad sides. But the fact of the matter is, it's like a real family. When it comes down to it, who's going to be there for you? And it's going to be them.
Absolutely.
And that same mentality would move right into that classroom as well. Like you weren't enemies. You didn't have all this. No, we're going to work on a project together because we're students. And we're going to grow, and it changes the entire atmosphere of a prison system, but also in their lives, because now I'm screaming at my kids on the phone. My nieces go to school. I am. What do you mean you get a tutor? And we start to break those chains, but we build those connections. Women need connection. We are emotionally needy. So thank you both for bringing that up.
Lynn, I think about some of the women also, the network of care that extends to the family members. That family members will send other people who are inside gifts or a package. They'll also come on a visit because they may not have someone else. And so the family becomes a family. And that's always so telling to me because there's a community. I remember we recently lost someone in Bedford Hills. And not only was that person connected to her own family, but there were other family members that were grieving just as much because she had become friendly with several other people who were incarcerated along with their community. So they were like on social media talking to each other, talking about it. And you forget sometimes that it's not just about those people that are incarcerated, but there's also a community. And then we don't forget the formerly incarcerated women who still stay in touch and give back. Judy, we're talking about her a lot, just because she's been quite a pistol in the system here. But there's other women who've established organizations, but they're going back inside and they're giving back. And to their own detriment, because some of them I speak to, they talk about the trauma of going back inside.
Yeah, it is.
But they said the trauma of not going back is worse because there are people still inside, so they have to give back. So that's the other network of care that's happening. And now with Wi-Fi a little bit more available in Bedford Hills and other prisons, that's really helping to stay the connection and grow the community as well. And Maine, I'm seeing people here that's incarcerated That's emailing. Like you, and
They
on
have jobs
webinar.
inside now.
I
They
just
work from
can't.
inside, real
My
jobs.
mind is blown when I see New York City, New York State is just not that. So my mind is blown when I see people emailing or when I saw a webinar or when they came to Beyond the Bars. It's a conference that we do every year. And Maine was there on the screen and they're marching. I'm flabbergasted, which is the community that we need to connect the outside to the inside. So sorry, I'm going on.
No, I really appreciate that. In terms of like, yeah, what actually do those networks of care look like? And obviously the importance of them being built on the inside, but also the importance of that sort of symbiosis of the inside and the outside, and kind of the work that everybody here does of kind of bridging those gaps and building that community across those kind of barriers. So yeah, that was such a great point. And also I think to our point about community and network, it is very interesting that we kind of have this thread of connection within our panel of like Judy coming up and all of those
Right.
things. So it's like it really is showing in real time what that sort of idea of community looks like. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to shift us a little bit. I think a lot of people touched upon this a bit earlier, and I do want to also leave time for our Q&A. But just kind of the idea of the sort of gender disparities that kind of exist in terms of who's getting studied, who's getting represented, and what stories kind of get told. And you all kind of touched on, I think one of the important things that we often don't think about is because women are such a smaller population of incarcerated folks that they often get overlooked in these different sort of ways. And I think here we have like visual artists that are doing that work of like actually documenting the experience of women, and sort of highlighting and like disseminating that information, making sure that people don't have that sort of gap in awareness. So I'm wondering if you can all just kind of speak a bit more to that sort of importance of representation, of documenting these experiences and sharing them and putting them in spaces where people may not be familiar with the kind of idea of the differences that happen for women within these spaces.
Go into the classroom and talk. Do panels. Do webinars. You know, connect with the folks that are coming home so they know that they're not coming home alone. Because we do have very limited support for women. And I came home 11 years ago and there really wasn't very much for women out there. And I had to fight tooth and nail just to find some place that would actually take me. You know, but the connections that people bring is what it just works. You have to really talk to folks and explain to them what's really going on the inside. I can remember my superintendent asking me to speak for her class, and I was just like, what? Are you going to let me talk to the truth? Can I say it real? Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And she's like, no, I want you to tell them the really truth of what it is. And by the time I walked out of there, she's like, holy shit, you just changed the mind of some of the most skeptic people. Because now they're actually looking at some of those circumstances and some of those things that nobody ever thinks about. Nobody talks about the domestic violence. Nobody talks about women being molested at home. Nobody talks about date rapes on TV. I mean, all of these things that can get compounded are all parts of those foundations that bring women into some of those spaces that we really don't belong to be in. But we didn't know how to deal with those then, and we weren't talking about them then. And now we're actually finally opening up the doors for all of these conversations. And that's what we need to do. We need to have more of these conversations. We need to have more Sarahs and more Rosalette. We need to have more of all of you, just to continue to highlight the strength and the power of women. And educating this, just educate them. I have the best job in the world. I get to bring education inside. So I get to teach the volunteers about a system that is so flawed and the humanity behind the wall, but I also get to help those folks on the inside get that education so they can come home and be a part of our community and have their children and actually survive out here and thrive instead of just surviving. So yeah, I love that part.
Yeah, maybe I can add from my experience when I brought the photo camera inside the prison. Actually, I was very scared because I mean, I didn't want, I didn't know how people were acting or if I was the anonymity can be a good point. So I went very carefully and say, look, please tell me what to do. But actually the women really wanted a picture of them. And they wanted a picture of the kids because stay in prison for, let's say, 2-3 years, they don't have a visual memory of the kids growing. That for us is so obvious, but they don't have any images of children where they are very small or where they starting to walk or when they are 4 years old. And mostly they need the picture to send back home because, as Lynn said, it's very important the connection from outside. So they need picture to send to relatives, to husbands, to fathers. So the lack of photography is a big problem in prison. And also they want to show to the world that they are resisting to the prison. They are managing to, the kids are well, because also what was funny, I really wanted, I don't know if this happened to Sarah as well. I really wanted to do close up and try to avoid the bars because bars are everywhere. And they say, no, we want a full length, show all our body, show all the body of the children, because we want to show how we are completely the person. Are we resisting? We are not. We want to show to our husband that we are not getting fatter, or that our children are growing well. So this need to be seen first from relatives, but also from people outside. That's so important. I never thought about that, but it's so important for them to be seen. Also, as I say, especially the kids, especially in Italy, I don't know in USA. In Italy, very few people know that there are kids in prison. I didn't know till 10 years ago. Nobody speak about them.
No, people don't know that.
They don't, not
Yeah.
here.
And there's very few prisons that actually allow mothers to keep their children with
Only
them.
11 in the US.
Yeah. But
The thing
And
is-
last things,
sorry.
I just want to say that was very useful to show, then to have something to show, like a documentary, a short film is very useful because you can reach public. So I went to school and was very good because lots of like teenager didn't want to see a short film about criminals. They are criminals. But then when they saw the story, they really changed. They thought, we didn't think criminals were like that. There is a big stigma, especially with young people. And they showed the film also in prison to officer. And what struck me is that guards don't spend lots of time, and I don't know in USA, but here are very separate. Like they watch, but they don't spend a lot of time with, especially with mother and kids. They are really close behind the door. And some officer told me, I never thought their everyday life in prison was like that. And they work there. So it's a way also for people working in prison to understand better, I think, the living condition of the people inside. In Italy, I don't know, in USA again.
In the US, the correction officers are connected. They do have a relationship with the women. In New York State, I should say. They're the ones that's getting formula, sometimes heating up stuff, telling them the pediatrician is here. They have a relationship. I've seen them, I don't know if they're supposed to be doing it, but I've seen them hold the babies. Because there's some rules around that. But the one thing that I want to say about even just communication and documenting, the nursery now always in Bedford Hills, they do a baby book. And every month you take pictures of the kids. So you'll know. I know for me, I don't even have really baby pictures. I've asked my mother, I'm not sure why. I still love mom though. But that's an important thing for people to have. And so at the end of the year, they put together an album and the mom helps to put it together of the kids. So they'll have that full year of growth. And that's so important. And those are things that we consistently fight for because they have to see what it looks like, to see what is approved. Is this a purpose picture? picture? Is there more than one person who is incarcerated in it? There's all these arcane rules, but that again is documentation, and it's so important. And even women, they like to see pictures of themselves. You know, they've been inside for years. To remember, even though for some people it's trauma, it's still a way for them to also acknowledge the life that they're living. So that's something else that we do consistently.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think you all brought up something that I think is really important that I think a lot of folks forget, just the idea of not only being seen and the kind of importance of that, as Rosella was saying, but yeah, like wanting to see yourself and kind of what it does when you are kind of shown through these different lenses that I think the carceral system often tries to deprive you of, but somebody coming in and taking a whole portrait of you or you and your child and that sort of thing. And yeah, kind of the ways in which you can adjust narrative for individuals internally through this sort of documentation, I think is really important, because I think often we think of, we need to get this information to other people. They have to know what's going on, and kind of raising awareness in that way, but also the sort of internal aspects of that sort of documentation that is really important. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I don't want to get us too far. I have many more questions I could ask all of you. I feel like we are having such a great organic conversation that we kind of touched on everything in interesting ways. Yeah. So, which was my hope all along. So, thank you all for that. I want to give us enough time and space for Q&A. So I see we have a few things popping up. So if we're ready to kind of transition to that space. I am so bad with webinars, so I'm not entirely sure if y'all can see the Q&A, or if I should read it to you all. But we can kind of go through them one at a time. So one of our first questions is from Jeffrey. And it says, I'm interested to know if children who are in these facilities with their mothers, do the children have access to good, healthy food? This is a horrible situation, very unhealthy, but do they have proper nutrition? I think that's a great question about access. That, yeah.
Yes, they do. They have formula that is designated for them. So if they're allergic to something, we make edits and changes to that. The prison does provide it, but we also, our children have grants that will also provide it, because sometimes a child is allergic to Similac versus, I think, versus Enfamil. So those kinds of things happen, or they can't do soy. The other thing is they'll get vegetables, chicken and all this nutritionist proteins that they have to have as young children. So yes, we also established 2 years now, we established a small garden in the nursery where they are growing their own food. So that's been really exciting for the women, and we get the kids involved. I wish I had those pictures. I never thought about, showing that. That would have been good for me to do. But anyway, so we have the kids in the gardens where they're pulling up dirt. And then they have a garden actually inside of the nursery in one of the rooms. So the mom also has access to nutritious food as well, because of course, we're encouraging a lot. The other thing is we encourage breastfeeding. So you have to, Jeffrey, ensure that the woman is eating well, so mom will eat well. So yes, for the most, would we like more? Would we like them to not be on a schedule? Because when a woman is pregnant, breakfast, lunch, and dinner doesn't cut it. You and I know that sometimes in the middle of the day, you want a snack. And so we'd like to see that change a little bit more. And that's the other gender challenge that is there. Your mother who's pregnant, you don't eat on a schedule. Also, mom may not be able to eat on a schedule because she's throwing up. And so, and also postpartum comes with a lot of physical issues that sometimes the prisons don't take into consideration. But for the most part, if we find that there is an issue, we just go and we advocate. And we've had pretty good success with the prison system in making some edits for individual women.
Yeah, also in Italy, there is a good food for children, but as in US there are problem of rules and schedule because in Italy are very strict. Like they have to eat like 11:30 a.m. and then 5:30 p.m. But sometimes even for children is not a good time, especially if Sunday if we wake up late. And this is a problem. And also in the nursery section, the problem is that first arrive the food for the mother, that is the general food for everybody, that is terrible. But the children are there and they are not allowed to eat that food because it's terrible. So it's terrible. The mother cannot eat in front of the children that they want to eat. So it's such a terrible because then there come a cook that cook only for children. But the time is terrible, and that's a big problem, for example. So sometimes the mother don't eat. They buy for themselves, or they find a way to cook or share foods.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. That was one of the things that I actually noticed in your film, Rosella, that, you know, a woman's feeding her baby, but she is not eating, and she's like, wait for the like pasta to come, like we're not eating that sort of thing. So kind of trying to navigate that layer of parenting in that space can be incredibly difficult. There's a really great question here about what topics would you say need the most attention if you were facilitating a curriculum in a women's prison, especially for women nearing reentry, but also for those serving long sentences?
Reentry needs to start from the day you walk in the door. Classifications need to be changed instead of harm, reduction instead of risk assessments, and focus on the humanity side of things a little bit differently. Women and men, reentry is where we fail. We're starting to really start looking into it more, and we're starting to put more programs together. But like I said, it really has to start on the inside. And those programs need to discuss, all those things that some women might not have even had, as credit cards and bank accounts.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
how do you do a budget? Because maybe you never had one. And how do I make those medical appointments? And what do you mean everything's on a computer now and we don't know how to turn it on? Because we didn't have access to that for so many years. I know for myself, it was a challenge coming home. You handed me a phone. All right. Now what am I supposed to do with this damn
Right.
thing? I handed it to one of the kids in the program. Here. And they're just like, yeah, we'll figure it. I'll put it all in there for you. But these are things that I should have known. I should have known how to handle some of this stuff, work on a computer, be able to put an application in, and know how to fill it out online, but also know how to advocate for myself. And that's why I push for the education the way that I do, because the more you educate someone, the more they can advocate for themselves. They can maneuver those ways with housing, because housing is such a key component, and that's something that falls so lack of when folks are coming home, especially women. There are not a lot of reentry programs that helps women. I know in Massachusetts, we don't have the kids inside with us, and there's not that connection. I mean, I would love to see it get a lot better than what it is, but coming home though, that's a different ball game. There should be programs where they can start working those relationships with their children, finding out what their strengths are so they can go get that job that they're going to need. But like we all say, well, you got to have housing. Well, you got to have housing, but you also have to be educated in order to get the job that's going to pay you a livable wage so you can support yourself and your family. And like I said, it has to start on day one, all the way until you're home. And then work with you every day if necessary, setting you up with the right people in the right programs and the right networks. It's all about the people along the way and the networks.
I think parenting is one of the topics that, and I'm not talking just for people who are have the kids with them. Parenting from 0 to however old your child is. And I think that's a topic that is not discussed enough. We run a parenting center, so we teach women how to parent while they're behind bars. I had an 8-year-old niece that I was babysitting, and I was trying to explain the math, and she's sitting right next to me, and she was driving me bananas because she was getting up, moving around. And so we're teaching parents how to do this over the phone. Like, that is even more challenging than the 8-year-old that I'm like, could you come back over here? you know? So, but we're not doing it, meaning the civilians, the women inside are doing it. Because we have staff members in our parenting center that are incarcerated staff, right? And so they're doing it. So parenting is something that is a topic that must be done. We've been trying, well, I have been talking to the commissioner in New York State about, could we just give some fake phones to people that they know what the phones look like, they feel it, they touch it? Or could we bring in virtual reality where they get to play on the phone? That's something that we've been trying to do. Another thing, not another piece for us is we believe that reentry needs to also include building relationships from the inside. So for example, how do you go home and take your child out to the park and just walk and talk with them? How do you take your child on a vacation? How do you take a vacation? Those kinds of things. How do you center wellness when you get home? Are we teaching women that? So we have proposed doing a virtual reality piece where mom and child are on the virtual reality and they come together and they are doing like a picnic in the park, or they're walking on the beach, or they're walking down their neighborhood and they're having a conversation and doing it for a few minutes and feeling what it feels like. And then also afterwards talking about it, engaging on it, because that's a form of helping them get ready to get home. Because the reality of the mother and child relationship in the prisons for those 6-hour visits is not enough. It's not enough to continue to build those relationships or even to consider what it's going to be like inside, and also doing virtual reality about how to have hard conversations. So I think there's things that's happening in our society now that could be brought into prisons so that people are more engaged with what's happening on the outside. And unfortunately, we're so worried all the time about security. And I get it. I'm not running a prison, so I don't understand all the specific and nuances. But there has to be ways that we can bring the outside in so that people, as you say, Lynn, from day one are more prepared.
Anyone else want to tackle that question about curriculum? And I guess we can also kind of expand like services that we think, would be needing the most attention in
Therapy. That would be nice,
Yeah.
Enough therapists would be perfect. I know in my system, if you weren't on meds, you didn't get a therapist. And it's like, if you don't need meds, you don't need us. It's like, really? Is that what you think?
I mean, pretty much everybody comes home with PTSD, right?
Oh,
So, yeah.
and it's funny because when you say that, there's just so many different things that you don't even understand. Like you're up at a certain time, or the lights are out at a certain time. And I can remember folks used to tease about that, like, wait till you get out. And it's like when you walk into a store and you see 100 different things you can choose from for a shampoo, you're so overwhelmed. One of the girls broke down and cried in CVS. She was like, I didn't know what to do. There was just so many different things. And what I don't think we touch base on is the fact that technology boom happened so quickly in such a time frame that the entire world changed within that time frame, but it did not change on the inside.
Absolutely.
So coming home was the hardest thing for me when I could walk on a bus and not one person was talking.
Right.
I was like, what the heck? Like I'm sitting down, like I grew up in a world, you sit down, you say, hey, how you doing to the one next to you? You hear the kids in the back acting up, music or something, but it was dead silent. All with their phones and earbuds, and no, you go into a restaurant, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Seriously, you want to spend $100 for a damn meal and you're not even talking to each other? You're on a phone? So these kind of things, we're not prepared. I wasn't prepared for that when I came out. And it was just like really hard for me because inside we have our own society. We have our own way of thinking, and it's really not the same as outside in a lot of ways. It's its own culture inside. And when you're coming out, you want to be able to socialize and know how to socialize. But now we're coming out, and what you know how to socialize is no longer part of the world.
Absolutely.
It's called, no, you have to know an email. Okay, well, And no, you have to know how to go on social media, and now you have to do this. And it's like you have to train them all over to be able to do all these technologies, but all that technology isn't anything human.
Mhm.
It's a screen, it's a tablet, it's a phone. It can't hold you, it can't hug you, it can't console you, and it can't have that conversation the way you can with a human being, in talking. So that is one of the biggest challenges I found when I came out is what happened while I was gone. I used to look at people like, what the hell did you people do while I was gone? Like I raised my godson. It's like, what, entitlement fits in here now? And he's supposed to be the parent, and I can't do this, you can't do that. So it's like a whole culture shock coming back out here, being away for so long, that you really don't have the tools that you need, that really need to be sort of addressed inside and out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I really appreciate the way that you all answered this question because it's such an kind of expansive definition of like what sort of curriculum and read. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
One last thing, I think credible messengers is not used enough. Like, you need more peer mentors, but we need to pay them a living wage, make them also go inside, start that process, and then be outside. One of the projects that we're shopping around to funders, I was having a conversation with a formerly incarcerated woman, and she's like, Alethea, I like therapy, but what I needed was a life coach. I needed somebody when I came home to say, this is where you go, this is what you do. And she said, it's more than a case manager because it's someone who has lived what I have lived. And then when I get scared to go on the bus, they don't look at me strangely. And I can call somebody and say, hey, I'm at the bus stop and I'm frozen. I don't know what to do. It's saying 65 is limited. What's limited versus unlimited? So what we are proposing actually is to have women who are formerly incarcerated between 3 to 5 years outside. They train them to be life coaches, and then they're going to be coaches to the women who are coming out, who are either coming from Rikers Island or from the prison. And we're paying them a living wage. Then we also have someone who is a business entrepreneur to help them develop that life coaching into a business. So it's not only about the coaching that they're doing for our women, but if they want to, they can coach other people in the community and they can make it a business along with whatever they're doing in their lives. And so those are the kinds of things, though, that we have to look at and do differently when we are looking at reentry, and also listen to the people who have the lived experiences. And so once this woman told us about life coaching, we've been on the hunt to try to get this thing funded because we feel like it's so important that a woman gets what she needs when she come out. And as you already know, Lynn, I'm preaching to the choir. The uncertainty when you come home is so much more. I haven't taken the subway in a long time. And so when I went there, they no longer have the Metro card. They have what we now call the Omni. So you just tap your phone. So I'm standing by the thing. Mind you, I'm out. But I felt a little disabled in that moment because I didn't know what to do. So I called my sister. I said, girl, the system changed. What am I supposed to do? She said, girl, just tap your phone and keep it moving. And so, but it made me think, damn, what happens when my clients come home? They came home they went out on tokens and we're now at a credit card. So, definitely we have to do a better job preparing individuals from the inside. That's where it must start.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I'm not sure if we want to tackle any of these other questions or if anybody wants to say any sort of final thoughts about your work that you weren't able to kind of fit into our conversation, or anything related to our topic, in our final 5 minutes.
Could we answer some more of the questions if we can quickly?
Yeah.
Because I would love to hear the voices of the people that are online.
Yes, of course. This is a question that is for Rosella, but I also think that it applies to a lot of what everyone's doing. But they talked about how useful or they said that you mentioned how useful it is to have a documentary for reaching bigger audiences. What are other tips on works and projects that actually reach larger audiences when it comes to this work?
I mean, for me, photography has been an incredible way of, I don't know, I've just been lucky enough to be in like these really big public shows, or there were years when people were hanging the photos in like law school windows. And so you could just stand there and have people like walk by and you could see them talk. And all of my work is accompanied by the women's own handwriting. So they have a statement that
Love
goes
that.
along with the images. And so, I mean, I don't know. When I was a lawyer, I felt like I could like help one person at a time, but as a photographer, and my work has been like in so many different kind of spaces. From I started out in community spaces, colleges, the courthouse, the legislative offices, and then it grew and it kind of went into like art spaces and museums. And they have different roles. You know what I mean? Like in a community space, maybe you're more expecting to see something like that, but it also generates like a lot of, you're kind of getting people who might be doing the work or can change policy or something like that. Then in a museum space, it's people who aren't expecting to see something like that at all. And so their mind is like a little blown. So I think, I mean, I think artists can have like a really good place if you're lucky enough to get your work to be seen, you know, which is always the question, how do you get your work out there? But now that I have this book coming out, I'm kind of hoping to go back more towards the community spaces, because that was where I had the opportunity. I always, at every exhibition, the women I photographed would come and I would usually be the moderator and they would speak about their experiences. And that was just, you know, I mean, I had the skill, I guess, and the camera, but they obviously had whatever it was they wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I completely agree with you. Photography, images are the things more powerful. And as you said, having their statement written, unwritten, or their voice also is very powerful. I think what I found in the last project, especially, is record their stories, their voices, and let people hear the voices. And if I can give a tip, I think everyone that working inside prison in project can find an artistic way to record some voices, record some interview, take picture with the phone if the administration allow, and bring this outside, because I think it's very important to use these means, especially uh, in school. I think for young children, for them it's important to see and to listen. I think everybody nowadays with this fantastic mobile phone can record and can do picture. Of course, there should be an idea behind, and it's good if it's a collaborative idea with the people inside.
Thank you. Um, So we are pretty much at time. Um, I think we're ending on a pretty powerful note in terms of, yeah, I think reaching wider audiences, like specifically through the actual lived experiences of women that are inside and outside as well, and kind of centering their narratives as we do this work, I think is a really powerful way to end. I would also just like to thank all of you for participating in this panel. It was such a lovely discussion, and I feel like we got such interesting perspectives and so much communal overlap, which is just always really exciting. And I also would like to just thank all of the attendees for your questions and for being present in this space with us. And we do have a survey that you can access in our chat there that one of my colleagues is linking. So you can kind of give feedback on the webinar and give us a bit more of your attention in that way. And it helps us shape these in the future in terms of topics because there's so many things that we could talk about, and I feel like we went in so many different directions. So it's always good to be able to expand on that in future Justice Education series. So thank you so much to our panelists. It was a pleasure having you here, and I really appreciate it.